What if everything you are taught about the Egyptian pyramids is wrong? Not slightly wrong? Completely, fundamentally wrong? I'm not talking about conspiracy theories. I'm not talking about aliens. I'm talking about cold, hard evidence that has been buried in academic journals, ignored by mainstream textbooks, and quietly passed over by the very institutions that claim to protect our history. For decades, we have been handed a comfortable story. That they were tombs, that ancient Egyptians, brilliant as they were, simply figured out how to stack enormous blocks of stone. But what if the real story is far more extraordinary? What if the pyramids were never meant to be tombs at all? What if the engineering precision involved is so jaw-dropping that it cannot be explained by conventional methods? And what if the timeline we have been given is off by thousands of years? Today we are going deep. We are pulling back the curtain on one of humanity's greatest mysteries. And by the end of this video, I promise you, you will never look at the pyramids the same way again. So stay with me, because this rabbit hole goes deeper than you can imagine. Let's start with what we are officially told. According to mainstream Egyptology, the Great Pyramid of Giza was built around 2560 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, also known as Cheops. It was built as a royal tomb, a monument to his eternal power, constructed by organized teams of laborers. Not slaves, as we once believed, but paid workers who ate well, received medical care, and took tremendous pride in their work. That part, at least, has been revised. In 1990, a workers' village was discovered near the pyramids, revealing a community of skilled craftsmen with their own cemeteries, bakeries, and breweries. This was not a slave camp. These were professionals, that much we know, but here's where the story starts to crack. The Great Pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. Each block weighs, on average, between 2.5 and 15 tons. Some of the granite blocks in the king's chamber weigh up to 80 tons, and they were transported from Aswan, a location more than 800 kilometers away. The pyramid stands 146 meters tall. That's 481 feet. And for nearly 4,000 years, it held the record as the tallest man-made structure on Earth. Now here's the question that nobody in school ever asked me. And I bet nobody asked you either. How did they do this with tools made of copper, wood? How did they transport 80-ton blocks across 800 kilometers of desert and river? How did they place those blocks with such precision that the gap between them is less than half a millimeter, a tighter fit than you can achieve with a modern credit card? The official answer? Ramps, sledges, thousands of workers. But engineers and architects who have actually studied the logistics have done the math, and the math simply does not add up. To build the pyramid in the 20-year timeline attributed to Khufu's reign, workers would have had to place one 2.5-ton block every 2 minutes, around the clock, for 20 years straight. Engineers and archaeologists, it does not. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees. Let that sink in for a moment. Modern engineers, with GPS technology and laser instruments, struggle to achieve that level of precision. The ancient Egyptians did it with the naked eye and rudimentary tools thousands of years ago. The base of the pyramid is level to within 2.1 centimeters across its entire 230-meter span. The four sides of the base differ in length by less than 4.4 centimeters from one another. The pyramid's corners are almost perfect right angles, within 0.05 degrees of 90 degrees on every corner. This is not the work of guesswork. This is not primitive construction. This is precision engineering at a level that our own modern builders openly admit would be extraordinarily difficult to replicate today. In 1925, surveyor J.H. Cole conducted a comprehensive measurement of the pyramid's base. His findings stunned the engineering community. The pyramid was so precisely laid out that it could only have been achieved with advanced surveying knowledge, including a detailed understanding of geography, astronomy, and mathematics that, according to our standard historical timeline, Egyptians should not have possessed at that time. There is also the matter of the internal chambers. The passages inside the Great Pyramid are cut with extraordinary accuracy. The granite coffer inside the king's chamber, the massive stone box long assumed to be a sarcophagus, shows evidence of machined surfaces. The angles are too precise, the surface is too flat, the tolerance is too tight to have been achieved by hand chiseling with copper tools. Thuban, Kochab, stars that held profound astronomical and religious significance in ancient Egyptian cosmology. When you look at all of this together, the precision, the alignment, the astronomical orientation, a question begins to form that the mainstream narrative cannot comfortably answer. Did the ancient Egyptians discover these engineering capabilities on their own in a remarkably short period of time? Or is there something about the history of human civilization that we are fundamentally getting wrong? This is a problem. The Sahara Desert has been predominantly dry for the last 5,000 years. For the Sphinx to have experienced the kind of water erosion that Shah documented, it would have had to be built before the Sahara dried out, meaning it could be anywhere from 7,000 to 10,000 years old. perhaps older. The Egyptological establishment pushed back hard. They argued that the erosion could be explained by dew, by ancient microclimates, by salt weathering, but Schoch's analysis has been reviewed and supported by other geologists. The water erosion pattern on the Sphinx enclosure, the deep vertical channels carved into the stone, is simply inconsistent with desert weathering. It is consistent with heavy, repeated rainfall over an extended period. If the Sphinx is older than we think, if it was built by a civilization that existed before 5000 BCE, then everything changes. Our entire understanding of when human civilization began, how quickly it advanced, and what happened to the cultures that preceded ancient Egypt is called into question. And here is the truly haunting part. Ancient Egyptian texts themselves speak of a time before recorded history, a mythological golden age they called Zep Tepi, meaning the first time. They described it as an era when gods walked among men and the world was ruled by divine wisdom. For centuries, scholars dismissed this as mythology. But what if Zep Tepi is not mythology? What if it is a cultural memory, a faded, encoded recollection of a real advanced civilization that existed in deep prehistory and then was lost? Researcher Graham Hancock has spent decades compiling evidence for what he calls a lost civilization, a sophisticated pre-Ice Age culture that was largely destroyed by a series of catastrophic events around 12 to 800 years ago, during the period geologists call the Younger Dryas. His work, controversial but meticulously researched, draws on geology, astronomy, mythology. In 1994, author Robert Bauval published a theory that sent shockwaves through the world of archaeology. He proposed what he called the Orion correlation theory. His idea was this: the three pyramids of Giza are not randomly placed. They are deliberately arranged to mirror the three stars of Orion's belt, Al-Nitak, Al-Nilam, and Mintaka, including their relative sizes and the slight offset of the smallest pyramid from the diagonal alignment of the other two. The match is striking. Photographs of the Giza Plateau overlaid with star maps of Orion's belt show an almost uncanny correspondence. But Bauval went further. Using astronomical software to calculate the precession of the equinoxes, the slow 26,000-year wobble of the Earth's axis, he determined that the pyramid's alignment to Orion's belt would have been most precise, not in 2560 BCE, but around 10,500 BCE. 10,500 BCE. That places the original design, or at least the astronomical alignment, at the very end of the last ice age, long before Egypt, long before any civilization we currently recognize, right at the edge of what some researchers believe was the era of Hancock's lost civilization. Now, mainstream Egyptologists dispute this interpretation. They argue that the alignment is coincidental, or that the Egyptians could have aligned the pyramids to a different position of Orion's belt that existed in their own era. These are fair objections. But what makes the Orion correlation theory difficult to simply dismiss is that it was not constructed in isolation. It fits a pattern of evidence: the water erosion of the Sphinx, the mythological texts about Zep Tepi, the extraordinary engineering precision that collectively points in the same uncomfortable direction. But as resurrection machines, engines for the transformation of the dead pharaoh into a god, launching his soul into the stars of Orion to achieve immortality, encoded in stone with mathematical and astronomical precision. Whatever these people knew, wherever they got this knowledge, it was not the product of a culture in its infancy. It was the product of a culture that had been thinking about the stars, about death, about resurrection, and about the cosmos for a very, very long time. Now I want to take you into territory that is even more speculative, but which has attracted the attention of some serious engineers and researchers. What if the Great Pyramid was not a tomb at all, not even primarily a religious monument, but a functional device? What if it was designed to generate, concentrate, or transmit some form of energy? This is the core of what researcher Christopher Dunn calls the Giza power plant theory. Dunn spent years studying the pyramid from an engineering perspective and reached conclusions that are, to put it mildly, startling. He argues that the internal structure of the Great Pyramid, the shafts, the chambers, if the pyramid was designed to create resonance, to vibrate, then the granite walls of the king's chamber would generate electrical energy as a result. They used mathematical modeling to analyze the pyramid's response to radio waves and found that it could concentrate electromagnetic energy in its internal chambers and beneath its base. The pyramid, they found, is not a passive mound of stone. It interacts with electromagnetic fields in ways that are geometrically precise and potentially functional. Could the ancient Egyptians have harnessed this? Could they have understood principles of resonance, electromagnetism, and energy concentration that we are only now rediscovering? That is the leap that most scientists are not yet willing to make. But the physics of the pyramid's electromagnetic properties are not in dispute. The pyramid does concentrate energy. That is a scientific fact. What the Egyptians intended by that, if they intended anything, remains one of history's great unanswered questions. They report a powerful resonant frequency that fills the room with a deep, sustained hum when sound is introduced. Some researchers have speculated that this chamber was used for ritual purposes involving sound, that the vibration it produces was intentionally harnessed for meditative, peer-reviewed papers about electromagnetic properties, engineering analyses that question the official construction timeline. Why is none of this in our textbooks? Why is the mainstream narrative so resistant to revision? Part of the answer is institutional. Academic careers are built on established frameworks. Funding flows to research that confirms what we already believe. The entire discipline of Egyptology is organized around a specific timeline and a specific interpretation of history. Challenges to that interpretation are not merely academic disputes. They are threats to professional identities, institutional reputations, and decades of published work. This does not mean there is a conspiracy. It does not mean that Egyptologists are dishonest or corrupt. It means that human institutions, like human beings, are resistant to change. Paradigm shifts in science are always uncomfortable, always slow, and always fiercely resisted, until the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. There is also the matter of politics and national identity. Egypt's pyramids are the cornerstone of Egyptian national heritage, a source of enormous cultural pride and a multi-billion-dollar tourism industry. When Robert Schoch tried to conduct further research on the Sphinx, he faced significant bureaucratic obstacles from the Egyptian government. Unannounced drilling and exploration of pyramid shafts by independent researchers have been shut down or restricted. And then there is the deeper, more unsettling reason. If the pyramids are older than we think, if they are the remnants of a civilization that existed before the last ice age, then we must confront the possibility that human history is far longer, far more complex, and far less linear than our current model allows. We must confront the idea that advanced civilizations can rise and fall, leaving only fragments behind. That the story of humanity does not begin with Mesopotamia and Egypt, but stretches back into a deep prehistory that we have barely begun to explore. That is a profoundly disorienting idea. It challenges our sense of progress, our belief in linear development, our comfortable certainty that we know where we came from. And disorienting ideas, especially ones with institutional and political implications, tend to meet fierce resistance. Let me be honest with you. Not everything I have shared today is established fact. Some of it is well-documented science. The erosion patterns on the Sphinx, the electromagnetic study, we do not know exactly how they were built. We do not know with certainty why they were built. And we do not know for sure when they, or the civilization that produced them, truly began. What we do know is that the Great Pyramid of Giza is the most precisely constructed large-scale structure ever built on this planet. That its alignment, its geometry, and its internal architecture reflect a level of knowledge, mathematical, astronomical, and engineering knowledge, that we struggle to fully explain given what we are told about the culture that built it. That the erosion patterns on the Sphinx raise serious, peer-reviewed geological questions about the accepted timeline of Egyptian civilization, and that the electromagnetic and acoustic properties of the pyramid are real, documented, and not yet fully understood. That is not conspiracy. That is science. That is the honest acknowledgement that our picture is incomplete. And in the face of incomplete knowledge, the most intellectually honest position is not certainty. It is curiosity. There's a reason human beings have been drawn to the pyramids for thousands of years. Long before modern tourists, long before Napoleon's scholars, ancient Greeks called them one of the 7 wonders of the world. Medieval Arab scholars wrote of hidden chambers filled with the secrets of all knowledge. Even today, despite everything we think we know, the pyramids retain an aura of mystery that no guidebook or documentary has ever fully dissolved. Maybe that is because the pyramids are not just monuments. They are questions, enormous stone-carved questions, standing 4,500 years or more against the desert sky, asking us, what do you really know? How much have you forgotten? And what might you rediscover if you are brave enough to look? The hidden truth of the Egyptian pyramids may not be a single secret waiting to be revealed. It may be something more unsettling and more wonderful. The recognition that we are still, after all this time, only at the beginning of understanding them. That the pyramids are not a solved mystery. They are an open invitation to question. If this video made you think differently about history, even just a little, then it has done its job. Share it with someone who loves a good mystery. And before you go, I want to leave you with one final thought. Every great leap in human understanding began with someone who refused to accept that's just how it is. Every revolution in science, in history, and philosophy started with a question that made the establishment uncomfortable. The pyramids have been standing for millennia. They have survived empires, religions, and civilizations that no longer exist. They will outlast our current understanding of them, too. The only question is whether we are brave enough, humble enough, and curious enough to keep asking why.